that you're getting from your fuel provider. It could be US Gain, it could be Trillium. Those are both members of ours that would be happy to offer you a fuel purchase agreement to review. And then while reviewing that agreement, to evaluate the extent to which the agreement will enable your fleet to share in the value from the sale of some of those environmental credits. I think that about covers it, unless there are more questions.
Any other questions for Alex? I don't see any, Alex. So Ben, I have stopped sharing my screen. You should be able to see the share screen button now for yourself. Are you on mute?
Yeah, I don't see it here. I don't know if you can try to do it again.
Let's see.
It might
here.
update.
All panelists. No, that's so. How do you want me to do that, Ben?
Well, it should give you an option to allow others to share the screen. Did you?
Yeah, I have all panelists can share.
I sent an invite to Matt, Ben, and Sam after we started with a panelist link. If you can maybe click out and sign back in on that. That would
Okay. Yeah.
In the meantime, maybe we've got Matt. Are you on?
Okay.
Can you go ahead, Matt?
Is he able to screen share? That'll be a test.
Well, we'll see.
I've got the same issue, but I did
Okay.
send my slides if you'd like to just pull them up, and I can ask you to click through them.
Okay, we can do that too.
Okay.
Sorry about the technical difficulties here, folks. There is that. There's that. Okay, Matt, we'll start with you, and Ben, maybe you can send me your slides and we'll just take care of it that way. Huh?
I did already send them. So
okay, terrific.
Yeah, they should have been on the same link that Matt did. I responded,
okay,
and I have a PDF and a PowerPoint, whatever works. And if not, I can do it without slides if I have to.
Okay, that's fine. All right, Matt, you are up.
Okay, sounds good. I'm just waiting to see these slides pop up here. But right. while you're pulling that up, certainly appreciate the time. Nice to meet all of you. As the introduction kindly suggested, my name is Matt Gold, Director of Sales from Hyliion. Kind of have a unique background, engineering, sales, and a little bit of soccer in there as well. But won't touch on any of the soccer background today. So appreciate the time. I've got a good amount of slides here, so I'll try to move reasonably quickly, and definitely want to address any questions that come up as we go. So you can go ahead and jump down if you don't mind. So just from an agenda perspective, a quick overview of the company, of Hyliion, and for those of you that aren't familiar, we'll do a quick overview of the hybrid solution, and we'll do a customer case study that actually I think aligns pretty well with the some of the information that Alex just shared, which some of which was new to me, so I appreciated that, and then a little bit of the software and connectivity side of our solution as well. And keep going. So at a real high level, what our goal and our mission as an organization at Hyliion is to really be a leading powertrain provider in the heavy duty industry, but focused on electrified solutions. So that doesn't mean we're trying to be an axle provider. It doesn't mean we're trying to be a motor supplier, but really our focus, and you can jump down to the next slide, is I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but our focus really is on battery solutions and software solutions, and then be an integrator of existing and proven technologies that are out there today. So this slide is just a quick snapshot of who we are. Our headquarters is in Austin. We were founded in the Pittsburgh area in 2015, primarily a venture-backed organization. We've raised around $52 million to date. We're in the middle of our Series B round of financing today, and we've got a little over 2 million miles of validation testing, both on our own trucks and in customer hands on 2 versions of our hybrid product, both the diesel version and the CNG version, but obviously we'll be focused today on the natural gas version. Can jump down. So this is, as I mentioned a second ago, these are kind of our 3 pillars as an organization. So, you know, hybrid electric drivetrains, you know, really focusing on clean fuels and lower fuel costs for fleets. And then the competencies that support those powertrains are really on the battery side of things and the software side. And then one other thing I just wanted to mention along those lines is we have a strategic partnership with Dana. So you can jump down to slide 7 if you don't mind. And this was announced in March of 2019. It's been, you know, beneficial across a number of ways, but primarily from just a credibility perspective with fleets. You know, I think fleets have been burned with startup technologies, you know, over the years, just from a longevity perspective. So I think having the Dana backing us and being a financer in our organization, you know, has been a big help. And then as well from a trade show perspective, you know, I'm not sure how many of the folks on the call have been to, you know, TMC and ACT, but there's just a snapshot on the left of, you know, our technology on display in their booth. Can jump down. So this next section was just we'll get into a little bit of the technical details of the product itself. So again, not sure in this audience how familiar everyone is with our technology, but basically it's an add-on hybrid technology, retrofittable across any OEM platform. And we basically convert either a 6x4 or a 6x2 tractor, and we convert it to a 6x2 with an electric axle in the tag position. So you can kind of see the exploded view on the slide here. There's a green E-axle. It is green in real life. We paint it that color. So we stick the E-axle with an electric motor bolted to the front of the differential there, put that in the tag position. We mount a small battery pack on the passenger side, and then with a cooling unit and a control unit across the frame rail. Can jump down 1 slide. And this is just a top view of what it looks like on a CNG tractor as opposed to a diesel, like on the previous slide. So very similar technology from a hardware perspective. We just apply the software slightly different. So on the diesel side, and that was really what the company was founded on. It was for over-the-road diesel sleepers. So it was all about saving fuel through regen braking and assisting going uphill from the E-axle. And then our battery pack could also power an in-cab electric APU for idle reduction. But on the CNG side, we use that same hardware, but the E-axle is basically just tune the algorithm a bit more aggressively to offset some of the power deficiencies in more aggressive CNG applications to make for a better driving experience, and add up to an additional 120 horsepower to the 400 horsepower tractors. So you can go ahead 1 slide down if you don't mind. So I just mentioned, you know, this is just a real simplified snapshot of how the technology is designed to function. We use regen braking through that electric motor and the rear axle to capture energy going downhill and when you're braking. And then we use that stored energy at the right times intelligently to make the tractor more powerful and maintain safer and more comfortable speeds for drivers with CNG tractors. Can jump down. So hoping it gets a little bit more interesting now, so you can go to slide 13. This is just a snapshot of a couple slide summary of a customer experience. So just kind of a case study. This customer is located in the northeastern United States. They're a pretty well-known grocer, and their challenge was they haul tandem trailers, as you'll see in the photo at the bottom of this slide. And it's a reasonably flat route going east on I-90 from Rochester to Syracuse and Albany, but they just had a couple hills that they were unwilling to run with their standard spec CNG trucks. So their proposition to us was, hey, if you guys can dial up your algorithm and, you know, make these our CNG tractors and our drivers comfortable cresting those hills, you know, we can cut our fuel cost in half for similar reasons that Alex mentioned. So you can jump down one slide. So this is so, you know, they basically presented that to us. It was actually the, you know, the customer's value proposition to us. We were doing a demo with them with the diesel truck, and we said, okay, this is interesting, let's give it a shot. So this slide is just kind of a summary of the technical process that we went through to achieve their minimum speed requirements on those couple hills. And the way we achieve that is with some of our analytical tools internally and through Geozones. So on the snapshot in the bottom left where it says Geozone development of this slide, you can see some small red boxes. And that's basically our internal process to intelligently capture energy at the right times, and then intelligently apply that captured energy at the right times to maximize speed on those couple key hills on their route. They call this, you can see in the top left, that spike in the topography graph, that they called that their moonshot hill. And then basically middle of last year, we were able to successfully traverse that hill with positive driver feedback. And then you can jump down to the next slide. So that really kicked off, it kind of turned from a demo project to a, you know, a real value proposition for the customer. So they went ahead and placed a repeat order through Volvo. So this slide's really just a quick summary of some of the collaboration work we did with the Volvo team in Dublin, Virginia, to spec the frame rail and the truck appropriately to accommodate our system, as well as go to a larger DGE fuel tank capacity so they could extend the range of their tractor. And then that photo on the right-hand side is that new truck. It just rolled off the Volvo line in mid-March. So that concludes the customer case study section. I've just got a couple slides here. Sorry, I've got the chat open, so I'm distracted here with the question. Sure, great question. The question was, is there a West Coast fleet case study that can be shared? So just recently, and I can get to this on my concluding slide as well, but we actually conveniently right now have a demo truck that's operating in the Portland area. We partnered with Northwest Natural to kind of co-market the vehicle together with some of the fleets in their network. I won't share the fleet name, but we're about 2 weeks into that demo with them, and we took the exact same approach as I shared on the previous slide, or 2 slides back, where we, you know, they ran the truck. They achieved around, you know, only about 20 miles an hour or so on a key hill in between Portland and their home base. You know, we did some Geozone development and got it up to mid 30s, which was only 5 miles an hour less than their diesel. So, you know, I don't know that I feel comfortable sharing more customer specific details than that, Michael, but I'm certainly happy to chat offline with you about that in more detail. So if you don't mind jumping down a slide, I just have
Matt, do you see this other question? So if it costs about 50,000 extra for the CNG setup over diesel, how much extra would the Hyliion electric axle cost?
Sure, getting right to it. No problem. Yeah, I don't mind sharing the retail price. So MSRP of the system is 39,000 US, and obviously there's some flexibility there around volume. And then we've also found that there's been an interest from utility suppliers to kind of partner with us and roll our technology into fuel contracts as well. But that is the retail price of our system. So you can go ahead. So I've already hit this, so I won't linger too long on this slide, but this again just hits on the Geozones. And then the one thing I'd like to note is just the over-the-air capabilities, you know, for that local customer that we just accomplished the last couple of weeks in the Portland area, we were able to tune the algorithm performance on a day-to-day basis all over the air, especially with COVID, without anyone being on site. So we certainly view that as a value of our technology. You can jump down one more. This slide focuses more on the remote diagnostics and health tracking of our system. So this is a snapshot of probably late 2019 of all of our customer trucks and systems on the road. So, we're obviously not at the scale where we've got hundreds of them out there, but, we're well past the stage where it's just onesie twosies, for a couple weeks at a time with fleet demos. And then we send about 50 to 100 messages to the cloud every minute that just help us remotely monitor the health of our system. We are completely independent of the truck conventional powertrain and drive, or I shouldn't say drivetrain, but powertrain. So we're a passive listener on the truck CAN bus. So we read messages off the truck like ignition position, engine demand load, actual demand load, fuel rate, gear selection, engine RPM, etc. But we don't talk back to the engine. We don't talk back to the transmission. So a good analogy that's been used in the past is it's like the equivalent of having a strong tailwind behind the trailer. The truck is going to react accordingly, but that makes OEMs and engine and transmission suppliers much more comfortable about how our system is integrated into the truck. So you can proceed. And this is just a quick screenshot of what our tablet looks like in the cab. We call it our CoPilot, and it's the driver's main point of interface with our system. So that white leaf logo, that's the Hyliion logo. That's kind of the most probably the most interesting thing for a driver to monitor while they're running down the road. So when it's green, our axle is applying power. When it lights up blue, it's regenning and capturing energy. When it's white, it's just it's just spinning as a passive tag axle. And then the bars on the left-hand side are all about efficient driving. It's more of a focus for our diesel products, or for our diesel, the diesel version of the system, which is all about fuel savings. But obviously, if CNG drivers can be gentle on the throttle, take advantage of coasting opportunities, gentle braking, reduced idle time, obviously all that rolls into positive fuel economy. So you can jump down. And then really these next, I think I've got one or two slides next, and they're kind of the conclusion. So happy to answer any other questions that have came up. But this is just a kind of a summary of the technology itself. So it utilizes Geozone capabilities to be basically an e-assist or a power assist for CNG tractors. The best use cases, I would say, are situations where CNG trucks would marginally be able to perform on a route, or drivers are uncomfortable on hills that aren't too long, right? It's not the solution for a 30-mile climb in the Rockies, but it is a great solution just to get an extra 10 miles an hour or so to drive more safely on the highways or kind of in that rolling type terrain. And then to very well aligned with Alex's comments in the previous session, our customers' fuel savings are on the exact same order as Alex mentioned. I have 50% on here. It's actually north of 50%, but when they are able to convert their diesel tandem spec trucks over to CNG, they realize over a 50% reduction in fuel cost, and that is only based on CNG fuel prices. It is not based on any RIN credits or anything like that. So I'm actually interested in learning a bit more about that. So, and then the next slide, the last slide in conclusion, is just kind of paths forward with Hyliion. So if there's any fleets that are interested in learning a bit more about the solution, or even utility suppliers that have a fleet in mind, there's a couple paths we can take. I mentioned the demo program through Northwest Natural. That's a photo of the truck that's operating in the Portland area now. We can retrofit existing trucks at our shop in Austin, and then obviously we can pursue the new truck route, where you can pursue, order a new truck through a Volvo, for example, and work with someone like a Fontaine to get our system installed. So
I have a couple questions here.
Sure.
There's actually one question that maybe is more relevant for the whole panel.
Okay.
But I do have one question about, can we share these slides?
Yep.
Can we share these slides?
No problem.
Yeah, we've talked to both sets of presenters. We're also recording this. Unfortunately, I got started a little late with the recording, so you'll miss some of Alex's comments, but it'll be recorded and posted, and you'll get a notice about how to get that. Now, I have one other question for you here, Matt, and is
Sure.
the e-axle kit reusable? Can you remove it from one truck to put it on another? And if so, what would be required if reused?
Sure. Great question. And we have talked about fleets in the past about, using it through 2 truck life cycles. Conceptually and from a expected life perspective of the system from our end, we don't see any issue with that. We haven't had systems with a particular fleet, for 8 years to really have a data point to speak to. But from a warranty and expected life perspective, and from axle warranties, et cetera, battery life, don't see any issues doing that.
Okay, now I have another more general question, I think, and I'll just open it up to any of our panelists. It seems that electric vehicle users state the green aspects as they discuss tailpipe emissions. Are there studies that reflect environmental impacts from cradle to grave, including midlife battery replacement, manufacturing, and disposal, as well as considerations regionally for how the charging electricity is created? I do happen to know that I think entities like Tesla are able to calculate your greenhouse gas emissions savings according to the region you're in. You can go into their showrooms, and if they have any anymore, and actually plug that, what's your zip code, and it kind of pulls up an average grid emissions profile and gives you how much you might be saving over a gasoline car there. But so the bigger question is, any kind of life cycle studies that you've seen on BEV or BEV battery electric vehicles on the kind of life cycle impact?
Sure. Great question. And we've actually, that I didn't include it in the presentation today, but we'll be making a pretty significant product announcement in the coming weeks. And that type of analysis has been a lot bigger focus for that product. I think for the CNG electric assist platform, our focus has really just been on enabling the tractors to operate in terrain that they can't today. And, I think it's not too difficult of a sell to convince anyone that a CNG tractor has a cleaner emissions story than a diesel tractor, right? Obviously, the new piece of the equation is the battery. But I honestly can't speak to that in too much detail. The one nice thing that I will share about our battery technology, we acquired our battery supplier about 1.5 years ago. The company's name is Gentherm, and we use an LTO chemistry, not an NMC chemistry. It's lithium titanate, and it's known for very fast charge and discharge rates. So it actually has a much longer life than conventional lithium-based solutions. Has about a 7 to 9 year life based on cycle count. So that's one of the reasons why we've seen no concern with transitioning our solution from one truck to another. And then I see a note about warranties on the side. Our standard warranty currently is 3-year, 370,000 miles. But like I said, we expect the battery life to exceed that.
Thanks. Matt, anything to add, Ben or Sam? Are you on mute?
Did you want us to start the presentation or?
No, just
Oh,
wondering if
oh.
you had anything to add on this more general question about kind of life cycle impact of batteries.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. Probably it might be better with the slides.
Okay.
But no, I was planning on hitting on that.
Well, good lead in then. I
Yeah.
just have two other questions. One, will the technology also work with LNG fueled trucks, Matt?
Good question. So the only hurdle with LNG trucks is just the frame rail availability for our system. So it would just require a back of cab battery mount as opposed to a frame rail mounted battery, but otherwise, no difference from a LNG versus CNG truck.
Okay, Matt, thank you very much. I am going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. And Charlie, you have a question here, which I'll get to in just a bit, while I pull up Ben's slide deck. So give me just a second here, folks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right, and we're going to come up. Where are we here? Okay, almost there, folks. Hang on.
Well, while we're waiting for those, I can maybe just start with the introduction for M-RETS. So our name stands for the Midwest Renewable Energy Tracking System. Although we kind of joke it's very similar to we were started by the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin in the early 2000s to create a regional solution to environmental commodity and tracking problems. Two states I know. Some of you in the Pacific Northwest might know, but probably don't. They don't always get along together. We're very different. Our football teams like to our rivals. However, we are now a more national organization. You can flip to the next slide. And so here's a little bit about, we cover all of North America, including the Canadian provinces and US territories. That's a little bit more recent, and that happened once we built our own tracking platform. So in December 2017, we launched our own REC tracking system, and I'm happy. We're going to talk about renewable thermal certificates, but once we built our software platform, we realized that there was an opportunity to leverage it. An interesting fact about us that we're an independent nonprofit. We're a 501c4, but we really operate like an innovative technology company. We have 3 full-time software developers that are Emrats employees. We have our own in-house system administrator, and then we also have 3 full-time software developers that are directly contracted, so they work on the Emrats platform full-time. You can see our mission up there. I don't want to read it for you, but give you a little bit of idea of what we do, and we're really trying to open up access to environmental commodity markets, and we see a real future in that. I don't know, those of you that have been following what BlackRock has been saying, and even more recently in their response to COVID, they think that environmental and sustainability metrics will be even more important. And so we view ourselves as not just opening up that market to everyday users, but to people that really value these metrics and commodities as a way to make investment decisions, and it's a way to understand where the economy and the future of industry is going. So what was the goal of our system? So we're a web-based tracking system. You can log on. Usually when I can screen share, I do a demo of the system, but one of the things I want to offer to everyone, you'll see some screenshots, but that I'm always happy if you want to reach out to me individually. I know that this can be shared, and my email is on it. We can set up something. These were the goals. Really, market transparency is key. Right now, there's multiple markets developing, and we're seeing the scale increase fairly rapidly year over year. Right now there's 100 RNG generators, and Sam can talk a little bit about this, but we see that the voluntary market is taking off, and it started with the big L'Oreal announcement, but it's starting to get even more momentum. And every day I talk to large commercial and industrial customers that are looking to decarbonize their thermal emissions, and they're looking at RNG or other renewable thermal opportunities. without having a tracking system, there is the potential for fraud or unintentional but still problematic double selling of the attributes. And so when you have multiple markets and a fast moving, increasingly the momentum increasing in the development of this market, it's important to have one source of truth to track. The other problem that we see is the liquidity in these markets. Because there is no centralized system to track and understand anything, it's a fairly illiquid and opaque market. And what REC systems did for REC tracking systems did for REC markets, we think they can do for renewable thermal and especially renewable natural gas markets. One of the things we emphasize is you're seeing this in transportation markets that that these are truly national markets. Unfortunately, we set up a series of REC tracking systems. They don't always get along and they don't always have import and export. And so one of the things that we like to emphasize is that if you're going to do this, you should have one system. And I know that sounds self-interested, but if you don't have one system, you should require interoperability, so that it's a requirement that if you're going to use that system, that they allow imports and exports between the different systems. And that's easy to plan for when you have APIs, and API is really just the technical term for the way that modern software systems communicate with each other automatically. And then the question before was about CI scores. So one of the things that we think is really important is that REC markets are a source-based world. And this is something that Sam, I know, believes very strongly in and has commented in the Oregon SB 98 docket, and I also do too. I think the world is moving to a life cycle accounting world, but REC markets are a source-based world, meaning if you have, whether you have wind, solar, even depending on the state you're in, trash incineration are considered zero carbon resources, but that's not necessarily the case. Every resource, even in electricity, but even more so in the thermal world, have very different life cycle carbon impacts. And we think that you should be able to track that. And the reason why is that if you're looking to replace your emissions through fossil gas, then you really need to understand what the offset is a loaded term in this world, but what by selecting a non-fossil resource to replace that, what is the actual benefit? Different sources of renewable natural gas have very different benefits. And then what we get into, which is interesting, is in REC markets, it's a 1-for-1. So if you use 1,000 megawatts one year, you need to get 1,000 RECs. And that's going to be different. Maybe it's not a 1-for-1 and it's a carbon reduction life cycle goal to get to zero. And so we know that there's conversations there about that. You can go to the next slide.
Hold on, I'm trying to get there.
No, that's okay. So this is just to show you there are these markets evolving. So we have the Green E, which is very active in REC markets, is going through a renewable thermal certification process, and they have a comment period that's open. The Renewable Thermal Collaborative is looking on the buy side of getting buyers together to understand, very similar to what the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance did for renewable electricity. And here's just a list. It's a small list of some of the things that are going on. I actually updated this yesterday. It didn't make it into this deck, but every day it's changing. Minnesota, unfortunately, had a bill where I live that didn't make it through because of COVID, but a lot of that happened in a lot of states. Colorado has VW settlement funds that are being used, but there's other bills that have floated through. So this is a very active front for legislation in other states. So if you're not paying attention to that, I highly suggest you do. If you could go to the next slide, please. We'll get into the real nuts and bolts of this. So the process that we built, like a REC represents 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy. An RTC represents 1 decatherm of renewable thermal, renewable thermal resource, a decatherm of renewable natural gas that when it's used is not used for electrical purposes. So you're not combusting it in a CT turbine to drive a generator to create electricity. You're using it in an HVAC unit for industrial thermal processes, or something more recently we've opened up to is the idea of using it to track vehicle fuels, because that's a growing market and a growing use is is using those attributes to comply. So this is a pictorial representation of the process. And just because of time, I'm not going to go through it all. But I think what I really want to point out here, and what we've built is a system that can track 100% of the injection. So we require either an independent reporting entity to provide us the data and verify the injection. We also allow self-reporting as long as there's an injection invoice. But we know that not all of our users are going to be selling into the markets that we track, but we require them to tell us where they're selling it into. And if they don't have something, they have to at least tell us that they haven't found a market for it. And the reason being is that we provide regulators and state recognized regulators to have free accounts where they can log into our system and verify that, all right, to make sure that someone isn't double selling those attributes. So we know where 100% of that injection claim to come from. And that's the idea between qualified and non-qualified generation. And then once the certificates are created, they can be retired or withdrawn. And the process of withdrawal is, let's say you plan to sell it to a voluntary customer, maybe the deal falls through, you still are able to sell it into the RFS or the LCFS, and you have a buyer there. You can withdraw the certificate on our system. There's a record that you never sold it. You pulled it off our system. There's a fee for that, but then you could then access those other markets. And so I think hopefully this, I'm not a visual learner, but I know people are, and so my team really made me do this, but I think hopefully it will help you understand. And I know someone asked about hydrogen. We do consider, I didn't include the definitions because of the time, but we will track anything, even green or blue hydrogen, even if it's natural gas hydrogen, but we'd require a carbon intensity analysis on there. And maybe you can jump to the next screen.
Ben, before I do, there is one other question here, and it kind of goes back to your prior slide. Are you looking at all at tracking CI values based on geologic sources by region, basin, or producer? So getting really discrete.
Yeah. So I'll get to that in 2 slides. I want to show you one quick, and then I will address that, and it might help you understand. So this is a real screenshot. Our system is live. We've already issued certificates. Our first generator was, and I always like to thank US Gain. They took a risk with us, and they registered certificates in a facility, a wastewater treatment facility. I don't own stock in them, so I'm not plugging them for that reason, but I think they've been active with us in helping stand up the system. But you can see this is what the system looks like. And if you go down, I'll get to the carbon values, or sorry, the next slide. So one of the things, this is, if you zoom in, you click on the certificate, we track multiple different pathways, and we've, because of some of the momentum that's happening in the SB 98 implementation in Oregon, we also think that that we do track partial carbon pathways and full life cycle, and it's using the Argonne National Labs GREET model, which is pretty detailed. So it's going from that source all the way to the actual combustion. But we also know that people may not be have an identified buyer, but so they could do a partial life cycle to from the initial feedstock all the way through to the injection, and then the customer, when they buy the gas, they can fill out the rest of the documentation through their sustainability reporting to say, all right, I took ownership over these attributes at this injection point. Using the GREET model, you can get to that regional, what is the carbon intensity of pumping that gas from point A to point B, and then the combustion. And one of the things that we require is comprehensive reporting. So if you see where it says that document, and that every carbon pathway will have to have a public facing documents where we allow redactions, but also a private facing document that regulators can see that includes the full analysis and details, similar to what the LCFS requires. So when you buy the gas, if you're buying RNG certificates on our system and they have a carbon pathway, you can get to that. We don't require a carbon pathway, by the way. It's not something we think some people will want to just acquire specific volumes, but we believe that the more data that we can provide to the users, the more value the certificates may bring to the producers, and the more value they'll have to the consumers. Does that help answer the question about CI?
I will assume it does.
Okay.
Until I get another
Yeah,
question.
yeah, and I'm happy for the person that asked. It's going to be hard to like show the PDF reporting and everything. If you go to the next slide. And this is what a retirement looks like. So claim. So you'd also asked about the carbon pathways. You can select a carbon pathway as part of the retirement flow. So let's say you retire it for a state requirement or either a voluntary or compliance program the state verifies. The state can log in, view the retirement, and actually see which carbon pathway selected. They will have the ability to see not only the public facing carbon intensity documentation, but the private without any redactions. And then you can fill out here the retirement reason. All this is part of the flow that I'm happy to demonstrate privately to anybody, just because it's hard to do it when I can't share my screen. And then you can see the period, the state. You can put as many notes in there as you want. You can identify customer information. And if you want to, you can share that data with them. And then the next slide.
Okay, just to do a quick time check here, we like to have a hard stop at 1. I think we're going to go a few minutes over. Those of you that need to drop off, please feel free to do so. In the meantime, let's continue.
Yeah, and I'd like to hand it over to Sam. I mean, you can probably read this. This is really just talking about, we've been mentioned in the SB 98 docket as the system that Oregon hopefully will move forward with, unless someone else comes along and show they have a better, cheaper, faster system. And I think the transparency as a nonprofit is really important, and all the money the revenue we collect from the operation of the systems goes back into the system. And we have experience doing this, over 10 years old, and we own our technology. So with that, Sam Witt from the Renewable Natural Gas Coalition is going to give some feedback.
Yeah, hi everybody. So being mindful of the time, I'll keep my comments brief here, but we're the National Trade Association for the pipeline interconnected renewable natural gas projects that Ben mentioned. There's a little over 100 of those right now. And I think the real takeaways from Ben's system and the importance of it is that it allows tracking of these renewable natural gas volumes at a scale that is commensurate with where we think the industry is going to grow to over time. And it's going to underlie the markets for RNG use, both in vehicles, which is obviously where things have started, and we're very, very supportive of Oregon's Clean Fuel Standard program. But also it's going to underlie RNG use in other applications. And because of Senate Bill 98 that Ben's mentioned a couple times now, Oregon's also going to be a leading jurisdiction there. So making sure that there's alignment between all end uses of renewable natural gas, and that there's robust and accurate tracking of that gas as it's being produced and put onto the gas system is really critical for the long-term growth of the industry. And it's going to allow people to continue to make very strong claims in the Oregon Clean Fuel Standard program that's going to drive the economic benefit that Alex mentioned at the outset, and will allow fleets to decarbonize using natural gas vehicles running on renewable natural gas. So, I think a lot of this complexity of the system will not, really impact the fleets that use RNG too much. It'll be folks upstream of them who are thinking about it, including our project development members. But we really wanted to emphasize how important we see these types of systems being moving forward, and the fact that M-RETS is in the lead and has, is likely to get a very strong push because of the SB 98 framework is fantastic. So we've been very supportive of it throughout, and just thrilled to see it all coming together at this point.
Okay. Any last questions? Ben does have a comment down there for folks, so I'll read it out for you. We will track anything a state or province recognizes as renewable or customers want us, M-RETS, to track. If there's a market, we can support the tracking. We already include green and blue hydrogen as something we will track, and we do feel strongly, again, we as the M-RETS, that if we are tracking a non-renewable thermal, it should include a life cycle carbon intensity.
Yeah, and we can prevent a retirement into a state program that doesn't recognize something, so we can control for all that. We really were set up to do renewables, but we know that if something is a lower CI than the current resource that's being used, I think it makes sense to help stand up a market for that.
Terrific. Well, I'll give it 30 seconds longer for any last question. While I'm waiting, I'll just go ahead and conclude our webinar this month. Again, and a reminder that next month we'll have Regional Economic Outlook, taking a look at the impact of COVID-19 on the national economies of Canada and the US, and also the specific drill down to the region. So we hope you'll join us and Grant Forsyth, the Chief Economist for Avista Utilities, on June 25th. Take a look at our website, nwga.org, to register for that. I don't see any other questions, so I want to thank our presenters, Alex, Ben, Sam, and Matt. We appreciate your time today. Lots of good information, and we look forward to staying in touch. Thank you, everybody. We'll go ahead and end the webinar now. Thank you.